The SEC requires management to evaluate internal controls based on a recognized control framework. COSO is an internal control framework. COSO is comprised of several organizations, as kind of listed on the slide there, and the purpose is to study the causal factors that lead to fraudulent financial reporting through internal controls and corporate governance. Two frameworks were developed to improve quality, being the Internal Control Integrated Framework and the Enterprise Risk Management Integrated Framework. As you can see, COSO is an acronym that stands for the Committee of Sponsoring Organizations. COSO is going to start out with the Enterprise Risk Management Framework, which focuses on the strategic alignment of the firm's mission with its actual risk appetite. There's also control objectives for information and related technology, which is referred to as COBIT. And that's a control framework for the governance and management of enterprise IT. Another thing is the Information Technology Infrastructure Library, the ITIL, which is a set of concepts and practices for IT service management. And also be aware of the International Organization for Standardization, or ISO, which addresses our information security issues. For the purposes of this course, we're going to take a closer look at the COSO International Control Framework, or COSO 2.0. And here we've got, it's an internal control is a process consisting of ongoing tasks and activities. It's not a means to an end, and it's not an end in itself. And what that's saying is it's a continuous process. You can't just go ahead and design your internal controls and put them on a shelf. You're constantly working with these. Internal control is affected by people. It's not merely about policies, manuals, systems, and forms. Every person on every level has an impact on the internal control of your organization. The internal controls can provide reasonable assurance, but not absolute. And internal control is geared towards the achievement of objectives in one or more separate but overlapping categories. And internal control is adaptable to the entity structure. That's helpful to go ahead and break COSO down into three categories of objectives, being operations, reporting, and compliance. So operations, of course, is effectiveness and efficiency of a firm's operations while safeguarding assets but still meeting performance goals. Our reporting objectives, we need a lot of reliability on our reporting. There's investors that rely on that. So there must be internal and external financial and non-financial reporting, and that must also be, part of our risk appetite. And thirdly, we've got our compliance objectives. We need adherence to applicable laws and regulations. Further, we have 5 components of internal controls, being the control environment, which really kind of sets the tone of the firm. We've got the risk assessment, which identifies and analyzes a firm's risks. Control activities will establish control policies, procedures, and practices. Fourth, we've got information and communication. This is relevant info, and it should be identified, captured, and communicated timely to the right people. And lastly, the monitoring activities. Management or outside parties should be monitoring on an ongoing basis. Taking a look in more detail at each one of those, starting with control environment. Again, it sets the tone and it influences the control consciousness of its employees. If your boss isn't very worried about controlling the environment, then the employees in turn aren't as concerned about it as well. This includes management's philosophy and operating style, integrity, and ethical values. The risk assessment, now this is a dynamic process for identifying and analyzing a firm's risk from both internal and external environments. It's really a time that allows the company to understand the extent to which those potential risks could actually affect their objectives. And then you'll take a look at those risks and actually consider the likelihood of the occurrence and what the potential loss could be. Our control activities are going to be, of course, those policies, procedures, and practices. And again, those should occur through all levels of the firm. The information and communication, this really focuses on the timeliness of it, making sure that you're flowing down, across, and up the firm, as well as keeping in contact with your regulators and shareholders about the information that really relates to them, and also your policy positions. Lastly, and very importantly, would be your monitoring activities. The monitoring activity really takes your internal controls and makes sure that you're implementing those on an ongoing basis. You could do this internally or with an outside vendor. But findings should be evaluated and deficiencies must be communicated in a timely manner. So necessary modifications should be made to improve the business process and the internal control system. It's a lot of work to, set up the process to begin with. It's important not to lose steam when it comes to actually monitoring those activities, after you have a program established. That's an overview here on COSO. Thanks for joining me.